Namaste, everyone. I've lived in many countries and mixed with many men.
I've shared their days of sunshine, gone with them in the rain. The fires that evening said we were brothers. The fires that evening said we were brothers.
A soldier I saw weeping beside a dying friend.
My officers had said I must hate him till the end. But in his grief I knew we were brothers. But in his grief I knew we were brothers.
A man sat on a doorstep to see the children play. The gentle way he smiled then would charm your fears away. A stranger he, but love made us brothers. A stranger he, but love made us brothers.
One day I climbed a mountain with friends of other land.
The words we used were different, but joy one understands. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. The words and customs vary like waves upon the sea. One life beneath the surface binds everyone to me. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. And brothers, why endeavor to set ourselves apart? The fences we've been building squeeze tight upon our hearts. Come sing the truth that all men are brothers. Come sing the truth that all men are brothers. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasures, all our melody.
Make us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share thy love.
Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasures, all our melody. Make us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share thy love.
Namaste, my friends. It's a great joy to be here. I want to welcome all of you. It's very nice that you have come to greet us and to hear what we have to say. What we have to say this morning is the wisdom of the ancient understanding that has come from India. We were recently sent an article. There's a internet, I guess you'd call it a newspaper, an internet newspaper called the Huffington Post. Maybe some of you have heard of it. But it has articles on it, and this article was 10 things that India can teach us, meaning America and the West, 10 things that India can teach us about living well. And it started out with yoga and meditation, and it ended with the respect for wisdom. And those two really are the theme of today's talk. We want to talk about the wisdom of Paramahansa Yogananda, and then we want to talk also about meditation and the pathway through meditation to self-realization. But first, let me talk a little bit about a more overall theme of what India has to give to the world. Swami Kriyananda often said that India was the guru of the world. One of the things that is a very great pleasure for Devi and me is that we get to travel everywhere. Ananda, when we started with Ananda, it was one little area, little piece of land that was not very large, and now it's grown into organization that is worldwide. We have 9 different communities where people live together, including one here in India, in Pune. These are large communities. Then we have hundreds of meditation groups and teaching centers around the world. But the size is not as important as the fact that, just as this article said, what India has to give to the world is the science of yoga, the science of meditation, the wisdom that comes. And so what happened in our path is that Babaji brought this science into the, one could say, into the open after many, many, many centuries that it had been taught secretly. Science of yoga, science of meditation, and the great upliftment of consciousness. But now came the time when that science needed to be brought into the world much more dynamically. And one of the changes that happened, Babaji's great disciple, which is part of our line of gurus here, Lahiri Mahasaya, when he went, Babaji touched him. And he went into samadhi for 7 days, remembering all of his past lives and all of his deep devotions over many centuries. And at the end of that time, Babaji said, okay, it's now time for you to return to your family. He had a family, he had a wife, he had 2 children at that time, and he had a job. And Babaji said to him, it's time for you to return to your job. And he said, no, please, let me stay in the Himalayas. Let me stay here with you, my Guruji. Let me stay in this high state of samadhi. And Babaji said, no, that's not what is right for this age. It was God's plan that you have worldly responsibilities. He hid from you the greatness of your consciousness until you were a man of, I think he was 33 years old at that time, until you were a man who had a job working for the British authorities. Imagine an avatar, a great saint, working as an accountant for the British. Does that make any sense? Didn't make any sense to me until I understood something deeper. And that's that what is happening at this time is that these great, great teachings of ancient India, Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. The essence of Sanatana Dharma is that we all come from God. We're an extension of God. We're part of God's creation of consciousness. We all come from that, and it is our destiny to return to our own roots, our own origin, to realize once again that we are God, that we are aspects of God, we always have been, and we always will be. That's the essence of Sanatana Dharma. The rest is variation and technique. But that's the great wisdom of India. And so Lahiri Mahasaya was awakened again to that wisdom and told to return to his family and return to his job. As I say, what sense does that make for a great yogi? He was a Mavatar, a great yogi, and he was known throughout. He lived, of course, at that time in Benares, and he was known throughout Benares as the greatest of all the spiritual teachers and the yogis. And yet he had this mundane job. What was happening at that time was something much deeper than just the drama of one person or one family or one job. It was a change in the way that religion needs to be practiced or spirituality needs to be practiced. In fact, we don't say that we're religious, most of us at Ananda. We say that we're spiritual, but not religious, because religion comes from the old Latin term rules, and we don't follow so much form and rules and structure, but spiritual, yes, indeed, because we are on a journey, as Yogananda said, an eternal quest of the soul to reunite with its origin in God. And so all of us, everyone in the world, is on that journey, though few know it. But now in this age, in the past age, before mankind's consciousness had elevated in the time of Kali Yuga, all we could do would be to follow forms. And if you wanted to be sincerely spiritual, then you left society and you went to the Himalayas or you went to an ashram, but you removed yourself from society and from worldly responsibilities. But now there's a changeover of ages, and what we must realize is that God does not live in the Himalayas only. God does not live in the ashrams only. God lives everywhere. He is everything. He is everywhere. He is every person. And we must realize Him in our daily lives. And that is the science that this line of gurus and Yogananda ji especially brought. Our teacher, Swami Kriyananda, was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda ji, lived with him, was trained by him, and was empowered by him to bring these teachings into the world. And first, our organization started in America and grew first along the west coast of America and then spread. Now there was a reason for that also, a spiritual reason. When Yogananda ji came to America, it was in 1920, and he came on the first ship that left Calcutta after the First World War, the city of Sparta. And he came, he didn't have any friends, he barely had any money. He had $500 that his father had given him. He had an invitation to speak at a organization of religious liberals, and they had invited someone from India to speak. But imagine coming to a new country with that little kind of a foothold in the new country. Then he began to teach, and he began to draw people to him. And his first disciple in America was, because he settled in Boston, was a dentist in Boston named Dr. Lewis. And at that time, Yoganandaji had a little rented room in a place that was kind of like a youth hostel. And so Dr. Lewis came to him, and Yoganandaji said to Doctor, "It's going to be big, Doctor. I tell you, it's going to be very big." And I think probably Dr. Lewis looked at this little room and looked at Yogananda and said, maybe he has delusions of grandeur. Maybe he doesn't really know what he's saying. But within 5 years of that time, Yoganandaji was teaching to crowds that filled the biggest halls in America. And there were times when there would be a hall, the biggest he could find in the city of New York, Madison Square Garden, I think he taught. And there were so many people, there were 5,000 people in the audience, but there were lines that wound around blocks, waiting to get in, not able to get in. And so the power of that personality, Yoganandaji, but the power of these teachings began to change the West and to change the world. They are destined, not just this line. I don't want to be sectarian. I don't want to say that God is only flowing through this line of gurus. God is flowing always in many channels into the world. But this particular channel is attuned to this age that we live in, because it's scientific. And Yoganandaji, when he came to the West, he knew that he had to take the ancient teachings in which he had been trained, and he was well versed in these ancient teachings. He had to take them, and he had to take the best of the best, and then he had to put those teachings in such a way that the modern mind, starting with Americans, it was a good place to start. The modern mind had to be able to say, yes, this resonates. Yes, this is truth. His very first book was called The Science of Religion. And he began writing it. In fact, he wrote it here in India before he came over. And in that Science of Religion, there was a very, very important statement. He said that everyone in the world is motivated by exactly the same motivation. And then he answered what that motivation is. I'll give you a moment to think. What is it that you think motivates everyone in the world? It's the desire to be happy and the desire to avoid pain. That's the essential motivation that flows through all of us. And then there are 8 billion people or more on this planet at this time. Every one of those 8 billion people translates how to be happy in a slightly different way. Some will think, if I have more money, that will make me happy. Some will think, money, I have enough money. I need power. Power is what's going to make me happy. Or others, relationships, or others, health, or others, whatever. As I say, 8 billion answers to what will make us happy. But gradually, we begin to find that there are certain things that ultimately make us happy and certain things that don't make us happy. And as the individual soul begins to refine what it knows is going to make it happy, then that alone is the spiritual quest. That's the science of religion. Not worshiping certain forms, not worshiping in certain ways, not saying certain prayers or certain mantras. All of that is good. But all of that, every one of those things is a stepping stone toward what we really want, which is always to be happy. And so we will find through our own experience, and it takes lifetimes to find this, but we will find through our own experience that certain things bring happiness, but that happiness doesn't last very long. that happiness stays with us only for a little time. In fact, psychologists have done studies. Even getting something that is quite amazing, like winning the lottery, or getting a big inheritance, or getting some big promotion in your work. Even those things that seem, well, now I've finally arrived, now I'm happy permanently. Yes, they make you happy, but then it begins to dribble off, and it only lasts about 6 months. And then 6 months later, your level of happiness was no greater than when you won the lottery, or got that promotion, or found the perfect spouse, the husband or wife. So it dribbles off, because anything outside of ourself is going to wane, is going to begin to disappear. You see, happiness is inside of ourself. It isn't outside. And so that winning the lottery or winning the promotion, what that did was create a reaction inside of us, and that reaction is where the happiness was. And so as long as we react positively to something, then we feel happy. If something comes along and the day after we have handed in the winning numbers of the lottery and we're dreaming of all the things we can buy and how rich we're going to be and how we're going to quit our job and tell off our boss who we've never liked and all these fantasies going on, then the official says, "Oh, I'm sorry, this number was smudged. That ticket is not the winning ticket." Well, then the reaction is, "Oh, this is terrible." The ticket meant nothing. It was the reaction that this is going to make me happy that made him happy for a day, and now he's going to be unhappy. How long will he be unhappy? I don't know, maybe 6 months. We had a friend who said that he worked very, very hard because he wanted to get a fancy sports car, a Porsche. And he worked for 2 or 3 years, saving up the money and looking at the model that he was going to get and the exact color. And he got it, but in between the time that that desire had come into his mind and the time that it was fulfilled, he came onto the spiritual path. And he began to understand that his happiness was inside of himself. Still, the momentum was going, and he bought that sports car, and he brought it home, and he parked it in his garage, and he drove it around from the dealer and then parked in the garage. And the next morning when he got up, he thought, maybe that's not exactly the car that I wanted. And he was unhappy. And he caught himself and he said, I realized I didn't have to wait 6 months to figure out that something outside of myself made me happy or didn't make me happy. It only took overnight for me. Well, the spiritual path speeds up this process in helping us understand what makes us happy and what doesn't make us happy. And so, gradually we begin to understand that what makes us happy has to be inside of ourselves, not outside of ourselves. There are certain levels of needs that we need to take care of. We need not to be hungry. We need to have sufficient housing. But those are necessities. And by having those necessities, it's not so much that they produce happiness as they help to remove something that would be painful. If you're hungry, you're experiencing pain. If you have nowhere to live, if you have to live on the street, there's a certain pain in that. And so we do need to remove those things that make us unhappy or cause pain. That's part of the equation. But once we have that, then we begin to pursue what Yogananda called unnecessary necessities. And those unnecessary necessities will never add to our happiness. Once we have a certain level of income that is sufficient to fill our needs, then more income, more wealth will not make us happy. In fact, you know what the joke is? It will make us unhappy, because it will begin to train us that our happiness lies outside of ourselves. It's always more, always more. They did a survey where they asked people of many, many different income levels if they were satisfied with their income. They said no. Even multimillionaires said no. Well, how much more do you need in order to be satisfied? Everyone answered 10% more. If only I had 10% more, then I would be happy. Well, that 10% more, Yogananda used a beautiful illustration. He said that when someone has a donkey that's stubborn and he can't get it to move, and it's carrying the goods on its back and he wants to have it moved, then what he can do is he takes a stick and he ties the stick on the donkey's head, and then he puts a carrot on the end of that stick, so that carrot hangs in front of the donkey's nose. And the donkey sees the carrot, wants to go, so he takes a step. But you know what? That carrot has moved still another 10 inches ahead. And so he keeps stepping and stepping, trying to get that carrot. So that carrot, let's say, is 10% in front of that donkey's face. And that donkey is chasing that 10%. As long as we're chasing 10% and it's outside of ourselves, and as long as we have hope that if we get that 10%, we'll be happy, it kind of works. We're mesmerized. The donkey keeps plodding along because he thinks, but if he ever got that carrot, somehow it swung into his mouth and he chewed it and gobbled it down, then he would just stop again, because he wouldn't have the hope that drives him on. And so we too are driven by hope to achieve something that's outside of ourselves. But like everyone with their income, once they got to the next level of income, they still weren't happy. And that next level above that still didn't make them happy. And in fact, we train ourselves by doing that to be unhappy, because the more we think that happiness is outside of ourselves, the more it recedes from us. And if we do achieve something, then we might rest for a little while, but then we're bored. So Yogananda said that there's a wave motion in this world. There's happiness, there's unhappiness, and for most people, in between them is boredom. And so you know yourself in your own patterns that if you've been working very, very hard, you feel, oh, if only I could have a rest. And so you find some time or a place where you can rest. And the first day or two, let's say it's a lovely cottage on the ocean, and beautiful surroundings. You don't have to do anything. The meals are provided. Oh, it's so wonderful to rest. The second day, oh, it's wonderful. You enjoy the view of the ocean. By the end of the first week, you're beginning to think, oh, isn't there something I can do to have some fun, to go someplace? And by the end of the first month, you're wanting to go back to work again, or you're wanting to do something again, but you're bored. And so there's happiness, unhappiness, and in between boredom. But gradually we learn that happiness is not outside of ourselves. How do we learn that? Well, first of all, we learn it through the fact that achievement of things outside of ourselves doesn't make us happy. We don't learn that lesson very quickly. It takes many, many, many times of achieving something and then realizing that it didn't give us happiness to see the pattern behind that. Yogananda ji said that people come on seriously onto the spiritual path when they get an anguishing sense of monotony. I love that phrase, an anguishing sense of monotony. because that pattern repeated for a little while is okay. Repeated over and over and over again becomes monotonous and becomes anguishing. And it's at that time that we turn towards something deeper. And we turn toward yoga and meditation and the wisdom of the great saints of the world. And so, to a certain extent, America represents a wonderful place because more than any place in the world, it's got a carrot in front of its nose and is running very fast in order to get that carrot. And many good things come out of it. Chasing like that, it knows it has to fill the potholes because we have to drive fast in order to try to get that carrot. And we know that we have to get businesses going because we have to get a big car that will go really fast so we can get that carrot. And so many good things come out of that chase, but not much wisdom. And in America, there has begun to spring up many, many souls with an anguishing sense of monotony. And Yogananda said that when he was in his ashram and he started a boys' school in Ranchi, when he was meditating there, he said he felt the call of many sincere souls in America calling him because they desperately wanted these teachings and this wisdom. He furthermore said that in order to balance, see, America has something to offer the world, or the West has something. I don't want to say just America, it's the West and the East. The West has something to offer the world: material efficiency, ability to work together, to do things, to accomplish. And the East has something to offer: the ancient wisdom, the other things such as family unity, a holistic understanding of health. These were things listed in this article of 10 things that India has to offer for our well-being. So the East and the West at this time need to balance each other. And Yoganandaji said because of that, many Indian souls are being born in America and many Western souls are being born in India. Devi and I, we're Indian souls. When we came into, by the time we were 22, 23, 24, we already knew that we didn't want that rat race. We wanted spiritual wisdom, and we were drawn to Swami Kriyananda, and we've lived our whole life and following these teachings. We're more comfortable in India, we're more comfortable in Indian dress than we are in America and in Western dress. And there are thousands like us in America. And there are thousands, and Yoganandaji said Americans or Western souls are being born in India in order to balance the two needs of the country. That's why we drive around and we see Kentucky Fried Chicken and Swenson's and malls, and half the people dressed in Levi jeans, which come from America. And so we see the counterpart of things American. But isn't it beautiful in the divine play that God sent Yoganandaji to bring this great wisdom to America? And Americans are, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions. There are over 15 million people in America who practice yoga at least once a week. There are something like 8 or 9 million people who meditate daily in America. So this has a tremendous, huge acceptance and influx in America. And obviously, you yourselves have seen the counterpart. But isn't it wonderful in the divine play that Yogananda went to the West, where he had to teach these ancient teachings in such a way that they were acceptable to the modern mind. They were acceptable to the scientific thinking person. They were acceptable to the business person. And then these teachings are now coming back to India, and we have had many, many, many people tell us that it's more acceptable to have these teachings because to a certain extent they've been modernized in America and then brought back. They're the ancient teachings of India, but it's as if they've gone through a screening process so that they're applicable to the modern age. And that is what the real wisdom of India has to teach us. So some of the things that we're learning and we're sharing through the wisdom of Yogananda is the fact that happiness does lie within. One, that we're all motivated by trying to find happiness. Secondly, that happiness lies within. Thirdly, in fact, I'll tell a story that Yogananda ji himself told. Some of you may have heard it. But it's apparently a true story that when the great Greek Alexander the Great, who was then at that time conquering all of the earth, or known civilizations, he came finally to India. And by that time, his armies were too extended and tired, and eventually he didn't conquer. He came to the Indus or the Ganges River, and that was as far as they were willing to go, and then it ended that he went back. But Alexander was always interested in wisdom. He was actually a great soul. And so wherever he went, he wanted to talk to oracles, or he wanted to talk to wise people. And so when he came to India, he heard that there was a very wise sage that lived nearby where he was camped with his army. So he sent one of his chief counselor to this man. The man's name was Kalyana. And so this counselor came, and he said to this hermit sitting under a tree, he said, "I come as an emissary of Alexander the Great, the conqueror of all the earth. And he gives you a command. He says, either you come to him, and if you do so, he will give you great riches, or if you refuse, he will cut off your head." Well, quite a demand, you know. What is the choice? Anyway, for Kalyana, the choice was, his answer was, you go back and you tell your Alexander, whoever he is, that I have no more use for my head than I have for his riches. If he wants to talk to me, tell him to come here. And so the counselor, being kind of nonplussed with this, went back and told Alexander. Well, he was intrigued with this kind of this was not the typical answer that he got from this kind of a demand. And so indeed he did go and talk to this great hermit. And he stood in front of him and he said, introduced himself, "I am Alexander, and I am the conqueror of the known world, and all the territories are mine, and I will grant you whatever request you have." And this simple sage said, "Well, I look and I see that your feet, they're no bigger than mine. So how do you cover more territory than I do? We seem to cover the same amount of territory. And yes, I do have a request for you. You're standing in such a way that you're blocking the sun. Could you move a few inches this way so that I can be bathed in the sun again?" And of course, Alexander was charmed and actually did learn from this man, and he asked him humbly to travel with him and teach. And this man came back and taught some time in Greece, where he was known as Kalunus, I believe his Greek name was. At any rate, the wisdom of India teaches us that things outside of ourselves are not, no matter how much territory we conquer, no matter how rich we are, no matter how famous we are, that will not lead to our happiness. But what will lead to our happiness is finally knowing who and what we are, finally realizing our own unity with God. The great saint Anandamoyi Ma put it in a beautiful way. She said that joy is the natural food of the mind, and we will always be hungry until we feast on that joy. She went further to tell her disciples, if you see someone running around after things, don't try to correct them. Don't tell them they're wrong. Don't try to stop them. Those people are hungry, and this is the only food that they have to eat. But tell them that that food won't satisfy them for very long, because the food that they're really after is joy. And how do we find that joy? Well, we must withdraw our attention from being too caught up in things outside of ourselves. Yogananda said that this is partly the yogic teachings and partly what we teach on our spiritual path, that energy, the prana of the whole universe, enters at the point where the medulla is. He said furthermore that that area of the medulla, which is the base of the brain, where the brain and the spinal cord, that's where they connect. That is the seat of ego in the body. Ego he defined as the soul that is temporarily hypnotized into thinking that it is this body or this personality. And so that individualization, that's the ego. So that's the seat of the ego. But normally the energy enters there, and it begins, the prana then descends down the spine, and at each of the chakras, Yogananda said, are like projection booths in a movie theater. And as that prana hits each of those throat, heart, navel, and the two at the lower extremity of the spine, the base of the spine, and a couple of inches above that, those are the 5 chakras. And the energy descends, and then it spreads out, and that awakens our senses, awakens the thought that the world outside of ourselves is real, and also that it's because our senses are attached to it, we think that something outside of ourselves will give us this happiness that we're seeking. And so the stronger that is, that's why chasing after material things over and over and over again simply trains that energy to go out more strongly. And the world outside of us seems more mesmerizing and more involving until we forget who we are, we forget what we're searching for. We're just like a little rat on a flywheel, and we're running faster and faster and faster. So how do we reverse that process? That is the path of yoga. As it says in Patanjali's his very first Yoga Sutra is translated into English is, and now we come to the study of the science of yoga. Yogananda taught that phrase, and now, is very important because it says something else has preceded that. And this long, long journey of the soul has proceeded for incarnations and incarnations, and finally we come, as Yogananda said, to a sense of agonizing monotony, and then, and now, we come to the study of the science of yoga. Yoga is that which reunites us with God. It reunites us with our own self. It reunites us with the joy that lives within us, and it keeps us from seeking something in a way that is false and will not produce the happiness that we seek. And so we come now to the study of the science of yoga. And in one sense, especially for this age, we could define the path of yoga as the withdrawal of that energy that has gone out into the world, out into desires, out into relationships, out seeking power, always trying to judge, are we more important than the person next to us? Are we more wealthy? Always comparing. All of those things. Now we're trying to withdraw that energy that keeps us caught in that world which will always hang 10 inches in front of our face because it's not our true self. And so that withdrawal of energy back into the spine and the lifting of the energy up, because these spinal centers are what sends that energy out. We have to withdraw it and we have to lift it up. I'll give just a little of the esoteric teachings of yoga because this isn't the time for it. But not only at the medulla, but at the spiritual eye and especially at the crown chakra, there is a tremendous power of, one could say, positive magnetic energy. And at the base of the spine is the kundalini, which is the accumulation of energy that has essentially gone down the subtle spine and accumulated there. And so we're like a battery with a positive pole and a negative pole. And as we know, if we connect those two poles, energy flows from the negative to the positive pole. So in one sense, yoga, true yoga, is the connecting of those two poles. And we can't connect those poles as long as all of the wires lead out from that central core. And so we have to bring the energy that has gone out through those wires back into that central core. And then we bring the energy up first to the spiritual eye. Our meditation techniques almost always, focus on the spiritual eye, because that is where enlightenment takes place. That is where we will realize, if we bring the energy from the kundalini and we withdraw it first and bring it up through these various chakras and bring it to this point between the eyebrows, then it's as if the negative polarity and the positive polarity are united. And when we truly do that, we will realize that we are not this body, we are not this personality, we are everything. We are God, which has created this entire universe. And our true self is not me individually, Nayaswami Jyotish. The true self is not you, your name, your gender, your position, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're Bengali or you were born here in Bangalore. None of that is you. In the past, your soul has been born many places, and you've had many definitions. So when this energy is brought up and united at this point between the eyebrows, then we realize that we're not this individual. The sense of individuality disappears, and we realize that's the Katusta Chaitanya, or in the West we call it the Christ consciousness. It means that we realize that we are the spiritual essence that resides in every atom of creation. It resides in every galaxy and every star. It resides in every particle of soil on this earth. It resides in every person that we meet and ever will meet. And all of that is our larger self. And in that state, we begin to act the way a true saint would act. If you know now from your own experience that the person next to you is your own self, you don't steal from that person. You don't do violence from that person. You don't lie to that person. These are the niyamas of Patanjali. He's saying that we do this automatically as we come into higher consciousness. But also, if we follow these rules, it will help awaken in us our own innate higher consciousness. And so the science of yoga is basically to follow outer rules that put us in harmony with the universe around us. But more importantly then, to withdraw that energy. This is the Eightfold Path of Patanjali. Again, I don't want to teach in depth. We do this in our centers and in our meditation courses. But just very quickly, the first two steps are the yamas, meaning that which we must control. We must control a tendency toward violence and lying and stealing and sensuality and so on. Then the niyamas, that which we don't want to control, where we want to allow the energy to flow, cleanliness, contentment, and so on. Then asana. Asana is the ability to be still and to sit within ourself. Then pranayama, the control of the prana. That's what it means that I've been talking about, where our prana is going out and connecting us to the world. Now we control that. We bring that back into our own self. And our path teaches specific techniques of pranayama. Yogananda ji, one could say invented, but it's really channeling from a higher source, something called energization exercises, which we teach and practice, where through tensing various parts of the body, we send prana to that part, and then relaxation, we withdraw that. And by learning how to send that energy and withdraw it, we begin to learn how to control the flow of that energy. That's what pranayama, control of prana, means. And as we do that more completely, we achieve the state of pratyahara, which is Patanjali's fifth limb or fifth branch. That means Yogananda called that shutting off the sense telephones. So the senses become very quiet. We go into this state automatically in deep sleep. Yogananda ji said, all of us are yogis. We go into samadhi when we go into deep sleep because the energy is withdrawn, the senses are shut off. He said, but it's counterfeit samadhi because we can't keep it. We can't hold on to it, and we aren't aware of it anyway while it's happening. Real samadhi is when we can consciously control the energy, withdraw it, shut off the sense telephones, and then the last three stages are the increasing depth of concentration and meditation. So the first is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Patanjali calls those three samyama. That's real meditation. So Yogananda ji defined meditation as deep concentration, which comes after we can do this, but we have to practice what we can achieve anyway. Real meditation is deep concentration on God or on one of the aspects of God, light or sound or power or love or joy, so on. When we immerse ourselves in those universal aspects of God, when we immerse ourselves, for instance, in light, which we see in the forehead during meditation, and increasingly clearly we see light of the spiritual eye at the forehead in deeper and deeper meditation. When we immerse ourselves in that light, the consciousness of who am I changes. The answer changes from I'm Suresh and I'm a man and I'm quite a big property owner and I have this family and that. It changes from that to I am light. And Suresh is one of 8 billion individuals on this planet. But light is the essence of every individual on this planet. In fact, Yogananda said our bodies are nothing more than condensed energy or condensed light. And when we realize who we are as light at the spiritual eye, then there's no difference between that light as it's in this body as it's in the chair we're sitting on, as it's in everyone in this room, everyone in this planet, everyone in this whole universe. And we go into the high stage of samadhi. That's the goal of meditation. But we don't get there quickly because we have a lot of momentum that goes out still thinking that we're going to be happy by something that's outside of ourselves. And so gradually we need to do meditation over and over again to begin to experience the joy of our true self. And so when you're hungry, as I was saying about Anandamoyi Ma, she said, don't try to stop people who are hungry from trying to find something to eat. But so we're still hungry, we still seek things outside of ourselves, but if we can counter that with daily meditation and be immersed in the sense of inner happiness, be immersed in peace, be immersed in joy, then that food begins to not look so tasty because we have another banquet. If you were given a banquet of the most exquisite cooking prepared by Divine Mother herself, and you compare that to your daily stop at KFC, you begin to think, well, of course you stop at KFC if you've got no other food, but now meditation gives you something else. And you begin to say, well, maybe that stuff out there doesn't look quite so tasty. And so we begin to feast on our own inner qualities. It isn't outside of ourselves, it's us. It's our true essence. And we begin to feast on that. If we feast a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night, then the way we work in the world begins to change. And if we can feast completely on it, then our work in the world changes. And that's why Babaji sent Lahiri Mahasaya back into the world to demonstrate that if you feast on your own inner self before you go out to your job, before you relate to your wife or your children, before you do daily activities, then you don't see that as something terrible. You see that as God itself. God serving God. You don't see your boss as somebody who's a tyrant. You see, perhaps he's still a tyrant. I won't say that your morning meditation is going to change your boss's patterns, but it will change your response to him. It will change the way you relate to him. And when that happens, our whole life begins to change. And so this science of meditation, the wisdom behind it, the real power of it is that if you practice it, it will begin to change your life and you will become a happier, more satisfied, more fulfilled person. And in your relationship to others, you will carry that inner peace and love and harmony, and you will begin to become a source of light, and you will spread that light to everyone you contact with. Now, isn't that worth doing? God bless you.
I'll also share a few words with you this morning, and I also want to thank you all for coming. It's such a joy to share with you this morning. I'm going to do a little exercise just for fun now. Suppose you're not feeling very well, and you go to your doctor, and you say, you know, doctor, I'm just feeling low energy and out of sorts. What do you recommend? And your doctor says, I'm so glad you came, because we have just discovered a new kind of medicine. And if you take this medicine, it will lower your blood pressure, it will strengthen your immune system, and it will actually retard the aging process, and it's been proven. test it. Would you like to try this new medicine? And what do you say? Of course, give me a whole bottle full of it. I'll take this immediately. Now, let's say, going on with our little experiment here, our little exercise, let's say you start feeling unhappy in your life and you're not getting along with other people and you're moody and just can't seem to find anything that's very meaningful. And you go to see a counselor and he said, you're very lucky today that you've come because we psychologists have been working on a wonderful new therapy. And this therapy will increase your ability to be creative and to concentrate. It will help harmonize your marriage and your family life and your ability to get along with other people. And it will give you a deep feeling of a balanced whole personality. Would you like to try this counseling? And you say, certainly, when do we get started? And you begin this. And now let's say you're at a stage of life where you've, as Jyotish was saying, the anguishing sense of monotony is starting to set in. And you said, my life seems so empty. I feel so cut off from a greater reality. I can't seem to find my purpose in my life. And you go to speak to an elder teacher who you have great respect for. And he says, you know, I've just been reading about a wonderful new self-help process. And if you do these techniques of the self-help methods, you will find lasting peace and happiness. You will find a sense of ability to know exactly who you are and what your direction in life should be. And best of all, you will feel a oneness with all of life and a oneness with the God beyond creation. Would you like to try this self-help technique? And you said, yes, let's get started. And my friends, all of these benefits that we've been talking in, the magic pill, the counseling, the self-help, they all can be condensed into one activity, and that activity is the practice of meditation. And I'm not just saying this fancifully. All of these benefits have been proven through studies and research that the practice of meditation will bring you all of these benefits and many, many more, many, many more. But all the things that we're trying to do to benefit our lives, the simple ancient science discovered by the great rishis and sages of India to help humanity, to find our way back to our true self, all of these can be found through the simple daily practice of meditation. And sometimes people say, well, I have a busy life. I don't have much time. How much do I have to meditate each day? And we say to them, as much as you will, do it. That's what you should do. And so don't think if we set the goals so high and far away, we think, oh, I'll never get there. You know, there's a story that our great Guruji, Yogananda, told of a vision he had once, where he was in a very crowded marketplace. And it was dusty and hot, and there were the housewives buying their daily purchases, and there were the little children crying and pulling on their mummies, and there were the dogs and the cows walking through, and the merchants calling out to the customers to come. And it felt so limiting. But he would notice every now and then in this vision of Yogananda that people would sigh and they would look up and they would see in the distance beyond their village was a beautiful high mountain with a snow-covered peak. And they would look at that mountain wistfully, but then they would sigh and they would go back to the dusty, crowded marketplace. And Yogananda, in this vision, looked at the marketplace and then he looked up at that mountain and he said, yes, it may seem very far away. It may seem very inaccessible, but at least I can take one step in front of the next, and how far I get, any step will be an improvement. And so with the practice of yoga and meditation, any practice, any step we take, however small it may seem, will change our lives. And Jyotishji and I have been a part of an Ananda Ashram for almost 45 years. We have seen many, many people come, practice yoga, practice meditation, and as Yoganandaji says, no one goes home empty-handed. Everyone gets something from this practice. And to the extent you are dedicated to it, you will get more, no doubt. But I want to just touch a little bit on some of the things I began with, because we're talking about, one of the topics of our talk this morning is meditation for self-realization, for realizing our true highest reality. But that's the high, high peak that Yogananda saw and that he moved towards. And of course, he was able to climb that peak. And because he reached that peak, he showed all of us the way. He plowed the way out of the marketplace, up the hill, to the peak of self-realization. And he turned back and he said, come. You know, Yogananda wrote a beautiful poem called God's Boatman. It's in his wonderful book, Whispers from Eternity. And in this poem, he said, I will come again and again across 1,000 crags with bleeding feet, if need be, as long as one stray brother is left weeping by the wayside. And you and I, my friends, we are those weeping brothers and sisters along the wayside that Yoganandaji came to show us the way, with compassion, with humor, with joy, with dynamic energy, and with the science of yoga and meditation, and his highest technique, Kriya Yoga. And so how, if meditation takes us to that high peak, what are the steps along the way? Because as we were saying, the benefits at the beginning of our discourse, we can look at our daily life, we can look at our health and our well-being. And through the science of meditation, and particularly the technique of the energization exercises that Yoganandaji taught, he said these were something that he channeled. He said this was his unique contribution to the science of yoga. And through learning how to awaken and direct energy through the agency of the will, we can accomplish healing for ourselves and for others. I have practiced these energization techniques for many years, and I have seen, both in my own life and in the life of others, great miracles. Once, we have a grown son, and once many years ago when he was a little boy, he was playing with some friends, and he fell out of a tree, and he broke his arm rather badly. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor set it in a cast. But that night, he was, and gave him some medication to relieve the pain. But that night, he was in a lot of pain, and he was crying and crying, and Mommy, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. And so I thought, all right, I've got to practice what I preach here. And I went over to him, and I did some of the energization exercises, channeling energy into my hands and forearm, and I put my hands on the cast of his arm, and just through the medulla, drawing prana, sending it out through my hands, I put them on that cast, and I felt a tremendous flow of energy. And I'm not unique in this, please believe me. Anyone who practices these, who learns how to become aware of this flow of energy within you, can use it to direct it, to heal yourself and others. And I put my hands on that cast, and I felt a tremendous flow of energy. And I said, do you feel something, Kalidasa? That's his name. And he said, yes, Mommy, I feel the bad energy going away and the good energy coming in. And he went to sleep without any pain, and his arm healed very quickly and very well. So it's not just something esoteric, and it's not something that isn't a part of your daily life. We had another friend who was an ice climber in Canada on the glaciers. And at one point he was, very cold, and he knew that at the end of each hike he had to return home, because if he stayed on the glacier he would freeze to death. And he was climbing and he slipped and he sprained his ankle very, very badly. He couldn't walk on it. And he knew if he didn't get home he would die of exposure. But just using the concentration of yoga and meditation, he began sending energy to that ankle that he was all alone, couldn't put any weight on it. But after, it wasn't right away. People think, oh, well, I tried it, it doesn't work. No, you have to put energy into it, and you have to do it repeatedly. After some hours of sending energy to his ankle with deep concentration, he stood up, he felt no pain, he was able to walk home. And so with the science of yoga and meditation can help us in our daily lives. And then we touched a bit about, when we were saying the benefits, on our family life and our interaction with others. Well, meditation is the ability to transcend your own personal perspective on life. I know some years ago, when I was just starting meditation, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was arguing with another woman, and I was very convinced that my way was right. Aren't we all? The way we think is the right way. I saw a sign on a shop in America that said, don't always believe everything you think. But how hard that is, because that's our only perspective. And so in this dream, I was arguing very adamantly with a friend. And then another woman, these were all people from the Yogananda ashram, another woman came up and she looked at me in my dream and said, you know, Devi, you're not always right. And I got so upset. I thought, this is my dream. Can't I even be right in my dream? But you know, no. If there's a higher reality, you have to tune into this. And I have lived, Jyotish and I have lived, Haridas and Roma have lived as a part of Ananda communities for all of our adult life. And we have, and the secret of the continuity and the success and the harmony of the Ananda ashrams and communities is, one, the practice of meditation, which, two, helps us to get out of our egoic perspective, and three, gives us the ability to ask, to try to tune into the will of God, not our own will. And in that, the Ananda communities have thrived. In the early years, Jyotish was the manager of the ashram, and I was his helper. And we would have meetings on different topics, and I would say 95% of the time, even though people would come in with differing points of view, when we all got together, meditated, tried to feel God's will on any situation, there was, I would say, as I said, 95% of the time, there was total unanimity, total agreement about which direction we should go in. And with that kind of united focus, these beautiful communities have been able to be created all over the world. You know, we have a community, an international community outside of Assisi, Italy. And there are permanent members there in the ashram from Italy, of course, Germany, Russia, England, Switzerland. But the point is, 50 or 60 years ago, those nations were at each other's throats, trying to destroy each other. And now that's why it was so charming to start off with the song Brothers. Now through the practice of yoga and meditation, these people from warring nations are brothers and sisters, creating a new way of life. And so the practice of meditation helps us in interacting with others, with that simple perception that there might be my will, there might be your will, but overall there is God's will. And if we tune into that, that will bring the greatest happiness for everyone. You know, some years ago, maybe some of you know this story, there was a big forest fire at Ananda Ashram in America. It was 7 years into the history of the community. We're situated in a forested area in a mountainous region, the Sierra Nevada mountains. And this forest fire came, and it was the fault of the government. They had a piece of equipment that was old and rickety, and it was sending out sparks. And the sparks caught the dry grass, and the dry grass caught the underbrush, and the underbrush caught the trees. And before many hours, thousands of acres were burned, and Ananda Ashram community was burnt to the ground. We had nothing left. We had been there for 7 years. We had no homes, we had nothing. And gradually we were able to regroup and find ways to begin rebuilding. And all of our neighbors around us also were burnt in this, their homes were burnt. Fortunately, no one lost their life of the residents. But they did an exploration, what caused the fire, and it was evident that it was the government's fault. So what is the first reaction from an egoic point of view? Let's sue the government and we'll get all this money to rebuild. And so all of our neighbors contacted our county government and said, okay, you owe us. We've lost everything. And the government, the county government, settled out of court, but for a great sum of money, and they were able to rebuild. Well, Swami Kriyanandaji, our founder, he said, no, that's not. He said, we didn't come to this area to take. We came to give. And we're not going to take our hard luck out on the taxpayers of our county. We will rebuild by God's grace. And you know, after we rebuilt more beautifully, and the money came from unknown sources, but it was because we were not thinking only, what is my need? What is my loss? Who took advantage of me? I must get revenge. But we said, and if I don't look out for my own needs, who will take care of me? We said, no, God will take care of us. And indeed, he did. And I was so proud to be part of a spiritual community that in its extremis at that time could live its teachings and live its beliefs with total conviction. And as also the benefit of yoga and meditation in our jobs, in our career, if we can approach it with right understanding, with dharma, with true principles, we can find fulfillment there. We are happy to share with you today, Jyotish has written a book called 30-Day Essentials for Career, and it's just been published in India just a few weeks ago, and we have some copies in the back, and if you'd like him to sign a copy for you later at the end of the discourse, we'd be happy to do so. But then finally, meditation for self-realization. Yes, it can improve the quality of our life, but as Yogananda ji said, I didn't come here to clean up your mud puddle. I came here to get you out of the mud puddle. And that mud puddle is the bondage of karmic involvement with daily life. We can live in the world, but if we are inwardly free, then our joy is unlimited. But even better, if we can use the science of yoga and meditation for the true purpose it was created, so that we can awaken to our own higher self. Swami Kriyananda trained us. We came to him quite young, and he trained us with patience, with kindness, and with deep respect. Here he was, a direct disciple of one of the great avatars of our age, Paramahansa Yogananda ji, and we came to him very unschooled in the yogic sciences, but he never demeaned us. He never made us feel, oh, why do I have to bother with such people of such unrefined consciousness? He would walk into a room and he would look at us and he would say, "Good morning, all you great souls." And he reaffirmed that in us. And he gave us faith that we could practice yoga and meditation. And he said, never give up till you have reached the goal, however far it may seem. And you may think your karma is bad, but Yogananda said, we never know. He said, it's like a nail in a board, and you're trying to pull that nail out with the claws of the hammer, and you don't know how deep that nail is. There was one woman in Yoganandaji's ashram who was going through a deep test, and she kept wanting to leave the ashram, but Yogananda, with his spiritual magnetism, held her. And finally, she couldn't bear the test anymore, and she left. And Yoganandaji wept. And he said, if only she had stayed one more day, that karma would have been over forever. And so in our lives, don't become discouraged. If you pick up the science of yoga and meditation, you won't get results immediately, but if you keep trying, if you keep redirecting your energy, you will get results, and you will look at your life and you will see things that used to cause you tremendous suffering and pain, and you will say, Lord, this is all your play, your Leela. Yoganandaji said that all of our life's experiences are for our education and entertainment. But he said, how sad that very few are either entertained or educated. Let's not be amongst those. Let's use our life's experiences to move forward spiritually and to take up the practice. And I have to say, being in India, sharing these great teachings in India, it is in your blood. In America, it's an acquired language. It's a second language. For all of you, it is not a second language. It is the language of your souls. And begin to speak it, because you have the blessing of being born in this great holy land of India, the guru of the world, as Yoganandaji said. Let's take advantage of the great blessings that have come and use this life well so that we can reach that high mountain peak Yogananda saw, the peak of self-realization. I would like to close now just with a little practice of meditation together. So, our teacher, Swami Kriyanandaji, has written a very simple and beautiful little book called Meditation for Starters. And he closes this book with a beautiful visualization, a guided meditation, one might say. So I would ask you all to relax, turn off your cell phones if you haven't already, put down everything, sit up nice and straight, and close your eyes, and concentrate at the seat of higher awareness, at the spiritual eye. And let's take a few breaths, a little pranayama. Inhale through the nose, hold the breath, and exhale through the mouth. Now let's do this again, but when we inhale, bring your awareness to the spiritual eye. Inhale, concentrate at the spiritual eye, and then exhale. Now one more time, let's inhale, bring the energy up, but this time tense the whole body. Let it vibrate with energy. And then exhale and relax. Now once again, keeping your eyes closed, and follow me in these words written by the great saint and yogi, Swami Kriyanandaji. He says, imagine yourself riding in a balloon, a hot air balloon soaring up into the atmosphere. Your soaring balloon has carried you high into outer space. Your spirit has expanded outward into the solar system, then out into the universe. Meditate again on that vastness. It is you. Realize that there is no emptiness anywhere. Fill the universe with light and joy. Feel their presence not only throughout space, that is, throughout what seems to us with our human senses to be space, but imagine them also scintillating brilliantly from every star and received in turn as desert travelers receive water by every planet. Light, joy, peace, love, everywhere in the universe, in every atom, in all the atoms of your being. Imagine the sun now as a spectacularly bright star. Watch as a ray of its light shoots out and touches a single point on our little planet Earth. Glide down that shaft of light as it descends to Earth and see it come into focus on your own town, your own neighborhood, your very home. Lo, it is entering your body and filling it with light and love and joy. Imagine bliss transforming your clothing into light, filling every cell of your body, animating and directing all your thoughts and feelings. Bliss flows through you now to accomplish even the mundane tasks of your earthly existence. You are no mere human being. You are a child of eternal light. Live constantly in that awareness within. Om Shanti, Shanti.